Yeah, and hopefully everyone joining us today is feeling a little calmer as we are now 1 year into the pandemic and we're all practiced in being, in our routines that help keep us safe. We're looking forward to the immersive future of just being in the same rooms with each other. But this is pretty cool right now too. But it's, the technology that's being pushed for us to all gather in these virtual spaces. Thank you, Kate. And we want to thank you all for joining us. And a big thank you to Hazel, Erica, Steve, Kate, and everyone else from the New York City Media Lab for inviting us here today. My name is Adam Lofton.
And I'm Gary Yost, and together, Adam and I created Inside COVID-19, an immersive stereoscopic 360 documentary into the pandemic.
And we are joining you today from the unceded ancestral land of the coastal Miwok people in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yes, absolutely. Takuyasen Oye. So we're going to get through our presentation with time for questions, so please add them to the question box while we're presenting to queue them up. Before we start, let's get clear on some terms. People currently use a lot of labels in the immersive media world. For example, Adam just shared that Inside COVID-19, or was it me, is an immersive stereoscopic 360 documentary, which is quite a mouthful.
Yes.
And maybe in the immersive future, we will have settled on simpler terms, but whether or not you call it 360 video or VR video or immersive cinema, we're all talking about the same thing, which is essentially 3 degrees of freedom, roll, pitch, and yaw, stereoscopic video that wraps completely around you, so you essentially become embodied in the exact position that the camera was in when the video was shot.
And we'll try and not, make things too confusing as we flip through all these different terms. So thanks for clarifying that, Gary. Hopefully I can keep it clear too. Okay, so this is kind of the question that we're gonna try and answer today. Since creating in this medium, stereoscopic 360, is so much more difficult than in the traditional documentary mediums that we began in, and we only get a tiny fraction of the audience members because of the limitations of headsets and sharing this medium, why suffer and go through all of this work? That's our goal, to actually answer that big question.
And our background brought us to this place of suffering for our work over decades for both of us. I mean, I've been working in the field of 3D animation since the late 1980s, when I invented the Autodesk 3D Studio and now 3ds Max digital content creation systems. I spent about 15 years making those visual effects software tools for filmmakers, and I eventually got so jealous of what they were doing that I left that, struck out on my own, and started making films, and more specifically documentaries. So for the last 3-4 years with the WisdomVR project, I'm integrating everything that I learned about 3D imaging along with everything I've learned about documentary filmmaking.
And actually, when I met Gary, I didn't realize that he was this prolific inventor of this amazing software and that he had this whole big fan club. But we'll get into when I met him in a minute. But he's an amazing person. I'm really grateful to be working with him. And I began my filmmaking career back in 2003. I really kind of started learning how to create documentary films. And the bulk of my work has been focused on creating short documentaries that are exploring pressing social and environmental issues in the world today. And really kind of the reason that I became a filmmaker was I just always have loved listening to people's stories. And there's not really any other career path where people actually invite you into their homes and open up their inner worlds and let you hang out and document their lives and then share them. And so I'm really grateful to be a part of this tradition of documentary filmmaking and now into this extension of this work within immersive media. So, before we kind of go into the future, Gary, I thought we could just talk about the past, like a little bit going to the past of where we began. For me, I actually was largely dismissive of the 360 medium and filmmaking and kind of VR because I had never tried it. And my first experience was with this VR film called 360 film called Notes on Blindness, and it was a story that is the perspective of a man, John Hole, who was losing his sight. And I had this Google Cardboard and my iPhone. I put it in there and I put it on, and I was brought into this man's world as he documented his gradual deterioration of his eyesight. And they used kind of like this kind of almost like animated world where you could see the highlights of what he was hearing and experiencing as his sight was failing. And I was just completely brought inside of his reality. And I had a real deep emotional connection. I realized there was something amazing here. And because I love storytelling, I really wanted to figure out what that was and be a part of it.
Thanks, Adam. And, for me, it was also a cardboard and iPhone experience called Waves of Grace, which was a 360 video created in, I think, 2015 by Gabo Aurora and Chris Milk, about a woman, DeConti Davis, who was an Ebola survivor who used her immunity after surviving that epidemic to care for orphans in her village in Liberia. And at one point in the piece, I was standing right next to this young girl in her sick bed and just totally connected with her. And I turned around and DeConti was right behind me. And it hit me so hard that I literally collapsed on the floor and started to cry. And I was like, what just happened? And I knew in that moment that that's the medium I want to work in, because that kind of impact was something that I had never experienced before. And that was going to be the way I spent my creative future.
Yeah. And so here we were both really excited about this potential, and we were trying to figure out how to do it. And so I looked to the internet like we all do these days, and I'm looking around, and there Gary was, and he was kind of having this conversation about it through this website that I don't think he really supports anymore, 360filmmaking.com. And here's this guy. And then I start looking into him, and I realized that Gary lives in the town that I grew up in, just 30 minutes away from where I live today. And we both are in love with this mountain that, the town sits at the bottom of. And there was just this synergy right away with us. And we just started comparing notes, and we're trying to figure it out kind of from our own angles. So I was really like trying to understand like what kind of stories I wanted to share in this medium, and how I was going to take all of my hard-earned documentary filmmaking skills and somehow kind of port them over, retrofit them into 360 cinema. And Gary was like on this full technical edge of the filmmaking, where he was like really understanding how to just get the most incredible image and stereoscopic imagery out of this camera, right?
Yeah. I mean, we had found each other at that time, and we were both trying to figure out kind of what was the important work to do in the medium. Most 360 people were shooting stuff like, people jumping off of cliffs and riding in fighter jets. And I mean, there was a lot of banal stuff like making real estate videos. But at the moment, I was trying to figure out how to create the most naturalistic, immersive, stereoscopic experiences possible.
Yeah, and it was humbling, actually, to just create this like really simple 360 experience. And but I forged ahead and through these technical difficulties. But even after some early successes with, getting 360 films into South by Southwest, I was just exhausted by the technical hurdles that this medium, really were kind of like integral to working in this medium. And I had run out of steam and didn't really know that I had the energy to continue.
That's when I showed up. We met each other, and I had finally found this really amazing experimental Zcam V1 camera array, and it was creating the kind of imagery that I always really dreamt of. So I was making great pictures, but I felt like I was a solution looking for a problem. What was the problem, And it was interesting. Evan Shapiro said earlier today in his talk that, this is a young person's world. And I was thinking, yeah, headset experiences are really first adopted by young people, and almost all decision makers, he said earlier today, would be Gen X and Gen Y and Z specifically soon. And I thought, at the time I was thinking these young people are going to need wisdom from their elders, and at the same time, I knew a friend of mine who was a doctor for a spiritual teacher named Ram Dass. He was one of the West's great spiritual teachers, actually in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And he was dying. And I asked my friend if I could meet with him and put this camera in front of him to capture this darshan in his garden, where he spoke about finding peace within death, which is one of my favorite topics. So I created that experience with him. And when I watched it in the headset, and especially even later after he had died, this experience of connection was so powerful. And I thought, wow, young people would get so much out of these kinds of connections. It hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was in that moment where it really became my life's calling to make more of these kinds of experiences.
Yeah, and if everybody looks here on the left-hand side of this screen, this is Gary with Ram Dass in his garden. And so Gary shared this experience with me because we're comparing notes and supporting each other in our projects. And he was right. Like, this very simple experience of sitting with this beautiful being and like really staring into them and their surroundings as they shared was enough. It like was this really huge impact. And I was, kind of caught up in like the visual craft of cinematography within documentary filmmaking and, and how we can make things so dynamic and beautiful. And Gary had kind of tapped into this piece that we're always searching for and that we know that grounds us in any kind of story, is like this really deep, authentic connection. And it was present in this work. So we actually finally had time to get together and play and experiment. And in 2019, we co-founded the WisdomVR project. And this,
which is a full-on 501c3 nonprofit.
Yeah, and this is our bold mission. And I think we're up to the challenge. It feels, the pandemic slowed us down a little bit, and we'll talk about that. But, believe it or not, since we've been working in this field for 4 years now, we're actually veteran 360 filmmakers. And so we're going to try to like lead the way into the 360 filmmaking immersive future, which is kind of funny because every once in a while we feel like 360 is kind of old news in the immersive future, but we're going to actually try and show you today why we think it is such an integral part of the immersive VR future and will always be with us.
Yeah. We're going to get to inside COVID-19. I know you all kind of came for that, and we're going to get there. But first, we're going to show you a little 6-minute video that has a little bit of inside COVID-19 in it. It's our reel for the WisdomVR project. It's only 6 minutes long. The main struggle right now with 360 video is people don't have headsets generally. And like we said up top, only a fraction of potential viewers can even watch our experiences the way we designed them. So, I mean.
Yeah, and it's kind of important, this is us being purists, like watching these stereoscopic 360 VR experiences on a flat screen is like watching this huge, beautiful IMAX movie through a toilet paper tube. But hopefully the heart of these people come through. But one day we would love for you to see these in a headset. So here we go with the screen share on this. And we will leave you with the video for a moment. Anything else?
Kate, if you can make it big, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Lost the audio. Did we lose the audio on that? Did we lose all audio?
I think I didn't hear anything. You just need to click the...
Take two. That was my fault, everyone.
Okay.
I figured it out. Won't let that happen again. Here we go.
You're a soul, and I'm a soul, and this is a communication of soul to soul. And soul to soul, it's love, 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 love. Because the soul loves everything.
Being human means being an artist. We cannot be human and not be an artist. We control the earth, impose upon it our own patterns. In the indigenous way, they geared their art to be in greater harmony with the earth itself.
Since the beginning of time, when Creator created the world was born, our people have been making and doing. For about 200 and some odd years, we've been interrupted. I've spent years coming into this and other archives to learn things. Drawer after drawer after drawer of the lives of people. They're never far from my mind. They're never far from my heart.
When I awake, I breathe in light. I know that I am here. Every day I wake up and I think, who am I going to hold up in song? These are hard times, friends, and we need to raise our voices together. And I know you got songs in your life that have kept you going in times when things just seem crazy.
Breaking news. The first death from coronavirus here in the United States.
We started tracking the news from China early on. And what concerned me is that the asymptomatic phase rendered our infection control protocols ineffective.
I've been a nurse too long and I know that sound. She cannot breathe.
The World Health Organization declaring the outbreak a global pandemic.
Here we are, it's March 26th. The U.S. has the highest number of COVID patients in the world. As a medical director, my primary concern is keeping the doctors and nurses infection-free, because if one of them goes down, that affects hundreds of patients.
It is a real privilege to hang out with people who are dying, because you're getting to know their last thoughts in their last months, weeks, and days of their life. And the things that people say are so meaningful and deep, and it touched my heart and soul, and it changed me forever.
You do not survive Auschwitz by resilience or anything except luck. What comes after has to do with the loving and friendship you're surrounded by your life.
If you step back far enough, even the seemingly isolated events take their place in a larger pattern. And where there's a pattern, there's a wave that connects it. And so the question inevitably becomes, is everything a wave?
You know, the word homelessness is used quite frequently in this neighborhood, but man, it's a lot more complicated than that. These are people who have other titles, other descriptions, other than that word that we just blast out on people. And it kind of stains them for life. Lost everything I owned in 30 days. Car, house, clothes, wife, kids, everything gone in 30 days. Something I don't want to do again. I actually lived these streets for 18 years out of my life.
When I was starting out, I hadn't any notion or expectation that I was going to save millions of acres. Going out on that land later and just feeling the vibrations, the beauty and permanence of it is really wonderful.
The Western way of looking at things has brought us to the verge of extinction, so that now we have to make our art a loving art, loving of the world, loving of the earth, and loving of each other.
All 8 billion of us are faced with a crisis that escapes simple answers. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us the reality of how interconnected and fragile our lives really are.
So we have a job to do. We're not special in that job. It's just the job Creator gave us. We just have a job to do. And it's care for the planet, for where we come from. And this canoe, our canoes, our baskets, our languages, our dances, they all fit right here.
Okay, so like in the short time since those experiences were created over the last year, 2 of those people you just connected with have died. And that, the power of the project lies kind of right there. It's like you can connect with those people now, even though they are on the other side of that threshold. And even though you didn't watch this in the headset, you can imagine what it would have been like for you if you really were embodied in the room with them, and how powerful an experience that is. Okay, so let's go on. Let's bring up the PowerPoint. Adam, I can't hear you.
Here I am.
Right, there we go.
Thank you, everyone, for that love. So, we're talking about the immersive future, and part of it is understanding the opportunity of this technology and trying to figure it out. So much of what Gary and I have been working on is experimenting within this medium and trying to kind of fail fast and also decipher what is creating an immersive feeling. And so my first 360 experiences I created were largely narrated. While it was kind of motivated, it was an effective tool, it was really missing this piece that I feel is in our current work, and it's this ability to break the fourth wall and to just speak directly to the viewer that is listening to you in the headset. And I think that even in that 16:9 trailer, hopefully a lot of you received what that feeling's like when somebody's staring at you and sharing their story. Yeah.
And but when you're experiencing a story like that in a headset, like I said before, it's like you're completely surrounded by this hyper real stereoscopic 360-degree imagery, and that feeling becomes heightened even further. And it can actually be distracting in some cases. If you've seen 360 videos, sometimes you just don't really pay attention to the story because there's all this stuff going on. But in our work, we make sure that every single shot in every piece supports the story, and it's because the scenes are filmed in a way that we designed to be heightened by the headset. So it kind of comes in through your sensory system and sticks in a way that you can't experience any other way. Like when you're in a headset, you can't look away from the screen. You're captive, and we take your captive senses very seriously. It's a sacred responsibility for us.
So we we're experimenting. We're trying to kind of push our edge every single time we're in a creative process with one of these amazing WisdomVR, experiences or WisdomVR subjects. And as you saw, we were largely focusing on elders. One of the key points in our project is to try and kind of preserve the people that are most at risk of leaving this earth the soonest. And so the pandemic hit. We're getting okay at what we're doing, and we had to hit this big pause. Like everybody has had to hit this great pause moment and figure out, what we were going to do next. And Gary and I were actually listening, kind of like tuning into the pandemic really early on, like back when we were hearing the news from Wuhan. My partner is really aware of what's going on in the world, and she was raising the alarms. And so when it all became very official for everyone, we had no intention of just like jumping back into our work right away. But when a story calls, you listen, you pick up the phone and answer it.
Hello. So I was introduced by a friend to Dr. Josiah Child. He's the man in that picture you're looking at there. He's an ER doctor who, while he was preparing his 5 emergency rooms, he managed 5 emergency rooms. His son's girlfriend came back from a wedding in New Orleans in mid-March with the virus, and she infected him, and he got unbelievably sick. And when I heard about it, which is before he even recovered from it, I was thinking, wow, this would be a powerful story that we could pursue. Even though I was incredibly afraid of, getting sick with the virus myself. How to do that? And, our favorite kinds of documentaries were about personal stories, and we knew we wanted to take that approach to the pandemic, but we were completely overwhelmed by the scope of that and all the confusion about it. And it was challenging enough to be in our own experience and fear of the pandemic, while also trying to find a way to share Josiah's. And what we finally realized, that we had to share our collective experience alongside his personal experience. And maybe some of you have watched the full experience in a headset, probably not. But for those who haven't, here's a little 2-minute trailer that'll give you a sense of the impact of the piece. Adam?
All right. I'm going to try and make this work the first time here.
Scientists estimate that there are more SARS-CoV-2 virus particles on Earth than there are stars in the sky.
Breaking news. The first death from coronavirus here in the United States. President Trump warning Americans not to panic.
We started tracking the news from China early on. And what concerned me is that the asymptomatic phase rendered our infection control protocols ineffective.
I've been a nurse too long, and I know that sound. She cannot breathe.
The World Health Organization declaring the outbreak a global pandemic.
Here we are, it's March 26th. The U.S. has the highest number of COVID patients in the world. As a medical director, my primary concern is keeping the doctors and nurses infection-free, because if one of them goes down, that affects hundreds of patients. Mr. Child, going to begin. After I was diagnosed with the pulmonary embolism, I started coughing up blood every few hours. In my own feverish mind, I figured I had still about a 30% chance to live.
The U.S. government's failure to execute a coherent strategy is a reason why we see no end in sight to this pandemic.
As we come on the air tonight, more than 200,000 people in the U.S. have now been killed by the virus. 200,000 lives lost, 200,000 stories left unfinished.
Humanity will survive this pandemic. It's just a question of the extent of death and suffering we will experience in order to get there.
Great.
So that's a little taste. Thank you, everyone.
So, you notice that we go inside the cell, we take you into the cytoplasm and watch the virus replicate. I highly recommend you find a headset and watch this thing.
So as we were wandering around trying to figure out how we were going to share this giant story that we're all a part of, we kind of tapped back into, well, we're always looking to Dr. Josiah Child to kind of lead a lot of that journey. And this is, something that he shared in the film, and that kind of has a lot of meaning and impact to our larger project. And so when we're looking at this, extent of death and suffering and why we somehow can't react quickly enough to it, like why we haven't learned the lessons from the past, so much of that has to do with our collective memory. And, one of the pieces that we're really working with in all of our work is that we're in the midst of this mass extinction moment on a scale that humanity has never experienced. And the coronavirus is a direct consequence of our expansion into wild spaces and our kind of increasing globalization. And so, as we erode these natural barriers of wild spaces and human spaces, we're coming into more and more contact with viruses like the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And then because we're so interconnected, we're allowing them to spread like never before possible. And we're seeing this pandemic, in our lives as this unique opportunity to actually understand how interconnected we always are and feel into this collective humanity.
Yeah.
And that was the real opportunity for us in diving into this topic and trying to share some type of WisdomVR experience through this work.
Yeah, creating it helped us face our own fears, like I said before. And, we learned everything we could. And we did that by immersing ourselves in Dr. Child's story. And, through our process of asking him hundreds of questions and learning from all of his experiences, we slowly began to understand that, it was not only safe to create this film, we could find safe ways to create it, but we found ways to navigate this incredibly confusing time that we never otherwise would have known we had. And, and our hope for the film is that we'd be able to orient and, connect the audience within all that confusion. So it'll help all of us in the same way. And as a time capsule, it'll help us reflect and remember our own experiences and lessons that we learned, during that year. So.
Yeah, and ultimately create a little bit more resilience in our lives, because, we're all facing kind of what feels like the next crisis, and the way that we learn to, have compassion in crisis and move collectively through it, then we will be able to face the unknown challenges in the future. And we do think that this is foundational in the work that we're working to create. So we talk a lot about using a personal experience to actually get into this work. And it's a really highly technical process, and it's really this balance of like not letting the technology get in the way of what we're ultimately trying to do. But we want to dive in for a minute and just talk about the technology.
Yeah, I see Mary asked this question: what's our 360 camera of choice? So we tried a bunch of different off-the-shelf cameras. There aren't many stereoscopic 360 cameras out there, and we tried the two generally available ones that we weren't happy with the results. And then Zcam, which makes the V1 Pro, which is up on the space station right now with Felix and Paul doing the ISS experience. They created an experimental 360 camera 3 years ago. They made 20 of them, and we have 2 of them that has 10 cameras. These fisheye cameras spaced about 31 millimeters apart. And because there's so many cameras and they're spaced close enough together, it creates this huge amount of data. So when we stitch them, we can create this incredibly natural stereoscopic field. And that makes the difference between a crappy stereoscopic 360 video and a really immersive, great one. And we pride ourselves in best-in-class stereoscopic imaging.
And so you can see here that separately, each of these lenses kind of offers this distorted small window into the world. But when we, Gary mostly seamlessly stitches them all together, they can create this incredibly rich depth field image. And then you get to be placed inside of that. And so that is really kind of, a parallel for what we're trying to do within these WisdomVR experiences, that we can take all of these somewhat siloed, distorted perspectives of our world that we're all experiencing in our own ways, and merge them together into a space where we can kind of understand this whole on a deeper level. And we're trying to figure it out together.
Yeah, I mean,
this project Inside COVID-19, sorry, Gary, it was pretty deep, pretty big opportunity to do that.
That is for sure. Oh yeah, Mary just mentioned the Yi Halo. What a fantastic camera! And one of the big tragedies of our medium is that Google stopped offering the jump assembler as a stitcher to creative people who wanted to make documentaries with it. And that was one of the single worst things that ever happened to the trajectory of this medium. And we hope those tools come back in some form in the future. But this issue of 360 video, and I want to talk a little bit about, the point of what we're doing is to, shine a light on all the beauty and the fragility and the resilience, the insanity of the world, and the technical stuff is just a way to get there. 360 video is very unique because we're capturing the entire scene. And if you look at some of the current tools with volumetric capture, they're only capturing an individual person. And our focus is on creating the person in context with the world. And we think that for the next 7 or 8 years, this is going to be the most technologically advanced way to do it before full volumetric scene capture of video becomes possible. So, we're using these tools to create a kind of a seamless pathway into a subject's whole life and the spaces they inhabit, and preserve their perspectives in their space in a way that people can really deeply feel them.
Yeah, well put. So trying to go back to why do all this, and it's really about this emotional engagement for us, and how can we create this connection. But also because, we're in the midst of this extinction moment, how can we also preserve all of the amazing memories and uniqueness of humanity? So we're going to share another short video clip with somebody who you already saw in the last video. And this will be the last video clip that we share. So hang in there.
We're almost done. We're about to open it up for discussion momentarily.
We have to understand the same thing that our ancestors understood.
Mute your microphone, Adam.
But they passed on something to us, and it was something of themselves, not just something from their ancestors. And that's our obligation. So we have a job to do. We're not special in that job. It's just a job Creator gave us. We just have a job to do. Let's care for the planet, for where we come from. And this canoe, our canoes, our baskets, our languages, our dances, they all fit right here.
Well, I thought we had 15 more minutes. Yeah.
That's right. Sorry that we went long here.
Yeah, I want want to answer some of these questions. Absolutely. Yeah. So, like L. Frank said, we have a job to do. So, Michael, you asked a great question about experience with universities as partners. We are currently working with one major university on a future project about the vaccines, but we are looking for additional partners for the WisdomVR project in general. And my email is if anyone knows of any opportunities like that, we are happy to talk to them. Yeah, why go through all the work? Yeah. Any other questions? Let's see that I didn't get to. What have we learned? I think we kind of got to that. Got to the camera of choice. Yeah, if anyone has any last questions. Yeah, we're really happy to share it. Grab a headset, take a look. Can't really show it here on a flat screen very well, but.
And if you're interested in creating your own 360 experiences, they actually have really pretty easy to use consumer monoscopic 360 video cameras these days, and you can create amazing time capsules of your own family members, of your own stories, songs, ceremonies, recipes, everything that is a part of your life that you would like to pass on for generations to come can be held all right there in these little time capsules.
Yeah, you can find links to watch the film on your Quest at www.wisdomvr.org. Thank you so much, Kate, and everybody.
Thank you so much, Gary and Adam.